I'd like you to think of your favourite teacher. Was it in high school or primary school? Were they young or old? Male or female? Black or white? I suspect it actually wasn't any of those things that made them your favourite, and that it was actually how they made you feel about yourself, that they saw you as a person, as an individual, not just a face in the crowd. Growing up in Canberra, I was lucky enough to have my favourite teacher, Mr. Cowan, in Year 4 and then again in Year 6. And many years later, after I'd moved to Melbourne, I was at university studying to become a primary school teacher, and I got a phone call from Mr. Cowan. He'd bumped into my grandmother at the shops in Canberra, and he said 6 words that I've never forgotten. Teaching is what you make it. Put in a minimal effort and you'll get minimal success and satisfaction. Put your heart and soul into it and you'll have a rewarding career. So my idea worth spreading today is that insight comes from proximity. Proximity means how close you are to something or someone. And my topic is children as content creators. But I'm talking about a very specific type of content, explanatory animations. So animations with a teaching purpose. And that's a multifaceted thing. It's a bit like a multifaceted jewel. You could look at it from so many different angles. There's the words, the imagery, the order, colour, spatial positioning, sound effects. But my particular angle is from the point of view of children making them for the sake of their own learning, not viewers, but authors. I'm sure you've all heard that saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I wonder how many an animation is worth. So rather than me describing these animations, I'd like to play you just one. It goes for 54 seconds, and it's by a girl in Year 6 who is explaining the science behind vibrating strings.
Stringed instruments such as piano and guitar have multiple strings, but the science behind the pitch of the notes is the same for each string. The pitch of a musical note is measured by its frequency, which is the number of vibrations per second. Variables of length, tension and mass combine to give each note its frequency. The longer the string, the lower the frequency. The shorter the string, the higher the frequency. The looser the string, the lower the frequency. The tighter the string, the higher the frequency. The thicker the string, the lower the frequency. The thinner the string, the higher the frequency.
It's actually a pretty good example of STEM. You've got the science behind the frequency. The technology was the computer that she used. Engineering is really about design, and you can see the design choices that she made. And of course, mathematics is the formula. But that formula is beyond what a Year 6 child would do. So I collaborated with her, I gave her that formula, and her job was to explain it. But collaboration is a two-way street. This next image is from a short film festival. As a performing arts teacher, we'd had these short film festivals at the local cinema. And this, just like the last animation, was made using the same technique. Good old PowerPoint. Insert, auto shapes, colours, all that. Get it how you want it, but the trick is insert a duplicate slide. You get an exact copy. Keep doing that, and there's your frame-based animation. But I didn't think of that. It was a group of children, and they taught me. In fact, preparing for this talk, I actually thought, I know how to get hold of Anthony. I know where his dad works. So I actually rang him last week and said that this opened the door to my path to academia, researching animation. So when I started researching animation, this is a screenshot of 6 animations I did, and the Victorian government commissioned me to make another 2 for a series of 8 at Monash University. So as a music teacher, I thought, I'll design the animations and an animation student will make them. It didn't happen that way. It took a year of phone calls and emails until the university definitively said, our students don't want to work with you, they want to do their own projects. And I thought, okay, that's fair enough, actually. So I approached a professional animator and I offered him the small amount I'd been able to save to do them. And he said, basically, you can't afford me. But he gave me some great advice. And this is where the insight comes from proximity. He said, as an animator, I make hundreds of decisions every day. That's the sort of stuff you need to understand. Become an animator. It might take you longer, but I think you'll appreciate that you did that. So this is from a boy in Year 4 in Houston, Texas. My lovely wife is a dual citizen, so we'd moved to Texas and I was working in a primary school. And the contrast here is not Melbourne versus Houston or the public school system that I'd come from to the private school where this was taken. The contrast was from leaving my comfort zone, not Australia, teaching performing arts. That was my comfort zone. So I had a short-term position teaching music, and when that was finished, the principal wanted to keep me on teaching Year 4 social studies. And I said, well, you know, I'm Australian. I can't pretend I know anything about American history, which is the main topic for social studies. And she said, yes, I know that. But your animation methodology, the children would love that. And you could model the learning process. So that's exactly what happened. So this was in a journal called, the title was called Animating Best Practice, was the article. And this was from the geography part of it. So he's trying to explain why the sun is hotter at the equator. So I said, why don't you copy and paste those yellow beams of light? As an animator, it'll save time. But educationally, it'll also ensure that they're the same height. And you can see it's not only closer, but it's more direct and more dispersed at the poles. So as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, you know, the animation process and the learning process are moving in the same direction. Same article, back in Australia, for my PhD through the University of Melbourne, I was working with a girl and she wanted to explain solfege, as in do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And she was away, absent for the beginning. She was in France on a holiday with her family. And she got back to Australia and said, oh, I think I'll quit, actually. Don't know where to start. I'm too far behind. And as she's telling me this, I had an idea about the windows on an aeroplane that she'd just been on. And I said, if you think of the major scale as certain notes from the chromatic scale, which is all 12 notes, windows open and closed, as the plane flies up and down, the names will change, but the sounds will be the same. So I need to tell you one more thing about this. I'd done the same project the year before, children making animations. I even had them make director's commentaries, which I thought was the secret sauce, as in they explain their decisions behind the scenes. But the confirmation committee at the University of Melbourne said, no, you've got these products, animations, which are great, but you can't tell the story to our satisfaction. You'll have to do it again. And at first I was disappointed, and then I thought, I can fix that. If the children in future, if they simply put the date into their file, so when they save their PowerPoint files, just put the date into it. They'll still get the finished product, but I, as a researcher, will have access to all of their work. So I wouldn't be able to show you this grid of the 12 keys and the 12 notes any other way, because that would be discarded. But when I saw this, if you know anything about Western musical notation, you'll know that's messed up. She didn't know the order of the notes. I thought she did. So in this article, I'm writing that this process is a diagnostic tool. It's a window into people's minds. You can see what they know or don't know because their job is to put it out there on the screen. So I had the product, as in the animation, and the process. If you're familiar with primary school education, you would have heard of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, the idea that children learn when they're challenged by a helper, someone more experienced, usually a teacher or a parent. And this is a Venn diagram, and there were 2 points about it. Firstly, notice the outer shapes have dotted lines, because for everyone, adult or child, new knowledge is abstract at first. It's out there. And as we bring it in and it consolidate it, it becomes solid. That's what the solid line is. But the main point of this is the bit down the bottom, the yellow part, where the child knows things that the adult doesn't. That's liberating. I don't know everything. None of us do. So to acknowledge that the children can know more than us is a step in the right direction. We need to give students voice. Another word for that is agency. We've known that for thousands of years. Pliny the Younger was an ancient Roman magistrate. And he said he or she who does the talking does the learning. But teaching and learning aren't the same thing. Teaching is what the teacher does, but learning is what actually happens for each and every student, and it's different for each and every student. We need to work one-on-one with our students. Am I saying that we need smaller class sizes? Well, that'd be nice. But no, you could have a class of 5 students and still teach the same old way, giving out information to them. In the early years, we know it doesn't work that way. We need to be one-on-one. Those graded reading books that children take home, they don't go up a level until they've read to their teacher individually. So we know it's got to be one-on-one. I've had hundreds of parent-teacher interviews, and the most difficult questions have always been from high-achieving children, and their parents say, "What are you doing to extend them?" And there's only one answer I've ever been able to give that satisfies them. When I say they're involved in open-ended projects where there's no limit to their achievement, that's what I'm saying. There's a famous article by Alison King, "From sage on the stage to guide on the side." She's saying we need to step aside and let our children be in the centre of their own learning. Hands up any parents here who have gained insight into their own children's learning during COVID, being at home with them, working with them. Thank you. What you've probably also noticed is how much time in education is wasted giving out instructions for the task. Project-based learning doesn't suffer from that. I like to think of it as a TV drama compared to a movie. In a movie, you've got to establish the characters and the plot. It might take a third of the time. In a TV drama, once you've done that, each episode picks up where the last one left off. Same thing in the classroom. When children are involved in projects, they soon know what to do, and your job is to coach them as a guide on the side. So I've talked about insight coming from proximity when I became an animator. And I've talked about insight into children's learning when I got alongside them as a co-designer and a collaborator. But I believe the implications of this are bigger than that. I've seen the learning process and documented it. I believe it's time for a new metaphor for education and learning. The old metaphor is like passing the baton, like a relay race, or passing the torch from one generation to the next. And that served us well in the past, but it doesn't work anymore. We have more information and data now than we've ever had, and it's growing exponentially. And that's a good thing. That's thanks to technology. So the new metaphor that I'm proposing, I like to call it learning from the driver's seat, where the child is in the driver's seat and we are the guide on the side, helping them. Am I really saying that primary school children should be driving around? Yes. Metaphorically, yes. I mean, how else can it be? Can you imagine putting them in the back seat? Aren't we sick of those old phrases? Are we there yet? How much longer? If we embrace our role as a guide on the side, we can become lifelong learners. And best of all, we can discover new horizons we can't even imagine. And that's where we want to be.